Hello, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of Career Chats. This is going to be kind of a unique episode where it's something of a young alumni panel. So we have a lot of great guests here coming from all sorts of different professional esports backgrounds right now. So everybody, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourselves? Guess we could start with
Kevin, you first. Oh.
I can kick things off here.
Okay,
Yeah. So hey everybody, my name is Kevin O'Brien. I am the COO and one of the co-founders here at GG Leagues. It's a little bit more about me and my backgrounds, right? I went to DePaul and was one of the people who helped start kind of the Esports Student Leadership Board, which helps bring a lot of the DePaul esports community together. I really fell in love with the community aspect of esports and kind of the competition side. And so from there, I was able to do a lot of research and work with a couple of different companies. I was able to, spend some time being a chapter coordinator for TESPA. The TESPA community brand will live on forever. But that helped me kind of open the doors to a lot of opportunities. But ultimately, I found myself over here at GG Leagues. And so what we're doing here at GG Leagues is just helping build kind of the youth recreational esports community. We work with partner park districts and cities across the country to bring esports leagues to their communities, as well as we also run leagues for collegiate as well. And so that's a little bit of what we're doing over here. I will kick it on over to Hauk.
Hey everyone, nice to be here. My name is Hauk Nelson. I'm part of DePaul's class of 2019. I studied marketing, was in part of the IME honors marketing program at DePaul. I first got started in esports, technically a while ago, but I guess post-grad, it would have been in 2019 when I graduated. I started working at a sports marketing agency. And for now, the past 6 months, I've been working at Energy Esports. We got teams that compete in Call of Duty, Overwatch, Rocket League, Apex, we're all over the place, and I work on the partnership side. So I work with our sponsors such as T-Mobile, Hot Pockets, The General, Levi's, McDonald's, to make sure that everything that we're doing is up to their standards.
Hello, my name is Lorenzo. I am DePaul class of 2019 as well, now that I think about it. It's been a long time. It seems like it's been 10 years, but now I am at Illinois Wesleyan Esports. Illinois Wesleyan University is a university down south in Bloomington, Illinois, central Illinois more so. And we have teams in League, Rocket League, Overwatch, Fortnite, and Smash. And I'm the head coach for Overwatch here. And in general, I just help out with things in the esports program. So like everybody in esports knows, when you're in esports, you kind of do everything because that's the name of the game. So no, that's the main role, Overwatch head coach, but then you do whatever. Got to do everything.
Right.
We participate in GG League tournaments at that. So thank you, Kevin, for running those. And I have to, give the advertisement. Their trophies are the coolest thing ever.
They are. I could vouch as well. Yeah, of course. My name is Matt Burkholz. I usually host all these Career Chat streams. So a little bit of a mainstay at this point, I guess you could say. But you might have noticed that this location is a little bit new for me. That is because today I am streaming from the Esports Gaming Center in the Loop campus at DePaul University. And that's special for today because today is actually the first day since, before quarantine that we've actually been able to open the gaming center to our students and alumni. So if you ever want to come by, play some games, check out the center for yourself, now's the time to do so. We're going to be open Monday through Friday. We have a set schedule, but for the most part, we're going to be open for most of the day. So you can check out all that information on our socials. Just find it. You can go ahead and check out our link tree, pick out your favorite social, and you'll definitely be able to find some more information there. And also, really quickly, to anybody who is watching that is a DePaul student, make sure you go ahead and check in over there. There's a link in the bottom right corner of the screen. It helps us track attendance. And by doing so, we're able to get a little bit more information on what kind of events you guys all like to see. And it helps us be able to put on better streams for everybody. So please go ahead and do so. It helps us a lot. And with that said, I think we're ready to kick off into our questions. So we can just go ahead and answer all of these, in the order that we just did our introductions here. So we could start from Kevin, go to Hauk, and then Lorenzo. So let's kick things off. I know we talked about this a little bit through all of your intros, but when did you decide that you want to work in the gaming and esports industry?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I feel like it's always been a long time coming. I grew up very, very kind of used to the N64 era, right? That's kind of how I grew up, playing things like, Zelda and, all those other games, right? And Mario Kart, and just that's kind of how I grew up on the gaming end. I took a little bit of a break. I played competitive soccer, and then I went to college to be a chef, and I worked as a chef for about 8 years. And so I kind of deviated away from, looking at the gaming industry as being a career path. It wasn't until I was able to come back to DePaul, get a different degree, that I really fell in love with kind of the esports industry and the gaming industry as a whole. For me, I think what was the time that I really wanted to work in this industry, though, was seeing how much of an impact esports has and gaming has on others, right? And people that may not feel like they had a community to be able to be involved in, or didn't feel like they had a place that they fit in. Gaming transcends so many different generations, right? Like people, it really helps bring a lot of people together over one common thing, and that is a medium, right, that you're playing a game through. And that's really why I fell in love with it, right? Like the industry's growing, obviously, right? And so that was a big piece of helped me kind of like be like, okay, right, like this is going to be a career for me. And so those are the two kind of moments, right? And that was probably in 2017, 2018, was when I kind of had that like moment where I was like, all right, I'm going to put all my eggs into this basket. I really put a lot of time into just researching and understanding a lot about the industry. But yeah, that was kind of the moment for me. Was when, coming back to DePaul, right? Like helping build DePaul Esports really helped solidify that piece for me.
Yeah, very nice.
I guess for me, I've always been someone that's played games. That's always been a big part of my life. From an esports perspective, the first game I really got into was League of Legends, and was really big into that to the point where I dropped out of college when I was a freshman. So I'm like 18, 19 at the time. Dropped out of college to join Fusion Esports, which was a team that was competing in the Challenger Series at the time. So this is like 2015, I want to say. I was the head analyst for Team Fusion when we competed in the Challenger Series. So did that for a little bit, which I don't really recommend dropping out of school to do. Definitely could have done it while still in college. But, if you're told that, hey, you can drop out of school, move to LA into a gaming house and do all that stuff, would you do it? I mean, the answer is almost always going to be yes, right? So did that for a while, tried to start my own esports org. I quit Fusion to try and do that at the ripe old age of 19. Did not know what I was doing, and abruptly failed about 6 months after trying to start my own company, which is when I decided to go back to school. Went to DePaul, got my undergraduate degree. Didn't really participate a whole lot in DePaul esports. I went to a few club meetings or something, but after having gone so hard and been so intense with esports for a while, I kind of wanted to take a bit of a break, but still played games and stuff like that. Wrote a big research paper on esports my junior year, which kind of reignited and got me back focused on trying to be involved back in the space again. And that led to a few job opportunities, which ultimately led to my first gig kind of in esports right after I graduated, working at a local sports marketing agency in Chicago called Kemper Lesnick. There are not that many esports opportunities in the Chicago area, which I think a lot of these guys would also tell you the same. So you kind of got to find what you can get. And Kemper Lesnick was a great platform to get me to where I am now at an esports org, where I work remotely. So that's been really good so far.
Yeah, it's a great story.
Yeah, in my case, I think I trace it all back to when I was a child. I was big into sports. And one day I turned on the old television and I think it was TGS. It was Counter-Strike Source for sure. And I saw that and I was just mesmerized. But because I played video games, but I saw them like they're playing video games like a sport. That's crazy. So I just fell in love with it, and then again kept playing video games and all that. Started hosting tournaments when I was a few years back. And yeah, then the opportunity came up for actually having a full-time gig in esports, which doesn't come every day. Hopefully soon it will be more common, but of course I took it immediately. I'm happy to be where I'm at.
Yeah, that's great. I like how you mentioned that, like, it's very hopeful that at one point, getting like a full-on career in esports is going to become more of like a standard thing, as opposed to like being, I don't really think saying it's like on the fringe is like really the right term, because obviously it's beginning to slowly reach more of a point of like, being more solid. But it is like comparatively a really new field. So there's trying to find professional opportunities, it could be kind of tricky. Would you say that would you all say that like you had a kind of like formalized education experiences, or like did you have to seek them out like in regards to esports? So I guess in like other words, would you like say that some of your educational like time spent at DePaul or elsewhere like would line up with like what you ended up having to do with your work in esports, or was it something you just kind of had to develop separately?
I would gladly jump on this one quick while I have my cat just hanging out behind me. You'll notice her; she just got back from the vet too, so she's hanging out. But I would say that in terms of like formalized training, right? Like no formalized like esports training when it comes down to like you hear about these different degrees, right, and these certifications that are coming out. For me, no formalized education. One thing that I really love about the gaming and esports industry, right? Like it doesn't just fit under one category, right? Like Hauk coming from marketing, right? Like I was in the honors finance program, right? I come from a very different background in terms of like, where my education is. I was also a chef, right? And there's a lot of parallels in like the gaming and esports industry, right? From like the hospitality industry too. And so it's more of a service-based industry, right? There's a lot of marketing involved. It's, to a sense, right? It's a marketing industry. It's a game development industry. It's all these pieces. And so for me, wasn't, necessarily the professional education or anything of that sense, but that's kind of how I grew up into this space. No formalized education. I think that DePaul did a great job though of helping kind of like harness and kind of help bring together, right, a lot of the pieces that a lot of the students wanted to do, from the leadership board to looking at different avenues, whether it's like with broadcast and production, research, right, and just making sure that we're able to provide as much different avenues as possible. Was definitely the best kind of like way to get feet wet in the industry. But yeah, that's kind of my experiences. Big thing here, right, is utilizing, LinkedIn if you ever wanted to start learning a little bit more, right, connecting with people. So many people are willing to just chat about the industry just because all of us want the industry to grow. So that's just kind of my piece.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that education definitely provides a way that you can leverage it to gain more experience in esports. I think one of the most important and great things about the industry is that it's so young and new that if you can start doing something early in the space, school or otherwise, you can start to get noticed, and that can start to lead to other opportunities. A great example of this, there's this kid goes by the name of Tommy Clark, goes by the name, I think that is his name. But he does a podcast as well as writes a bunch of articles about the space, and on a weekly, bi-weekly basis, something like that. And just about like lessons that he's learned from a marketing perspective and how those apply to different things within the esports and gaming space. And there's a ton of opportunity for content creation like that, to take kind of what you learned about the space, case studies, stuff like that, and bring that to esports and gaming. If you're interested in finance, or if you're interested in marketing, graphic design, video production, all that stuff is all a part of esports. So I would say more than anything, it's just like leveraging any opportunity you can find to hone your craft in whatever field that you want and applying it to esports. And DePaul is a great way to do that.
Yeah, I think that's really well said.
Yeah, I think those are really, really good points. Before I segue into mine, I see Andy Clark fans in the chat. Shout out Andy Clark. Take his classes. He's amazing. But with that said, like, for example, I had my education. I was a filmmaker, digital cinema, the now defunct program. I think it's just film and television now. But so I was a film major, which has nothing to do with what I'm doing right now, obviously, right? I actually did end up doing a bit of content work for Illinois Wesleyan, so that's cool. I got to put that to work. But I think that most importantly, more so than like specifically what major or like what program you're in, again, like Hauk was mentioning and how Kevin said, what matters is that you take the opportunities that you get and you manage to do something with like that is tangential to esports, that is in esports with whatever you're passionate or and like your expertise is. Because obviously, like, the good news about esports is that opposed to like a bunch of other industries, we can just take traditional sports, for example, because that's the easy parallel. Like, you can't just host like a big collegiate football tournament or something, right? that you just can't. Like, what are you gonna do? Call up every school from like everywhere and do that? That is more possible in esports. Like, even if it's not the greatest, for like my example, collegiate, right? It might not be the greatest esports collegiate tournament ever, but it shows that like you have the drive and you know how to do certain things, even at a smaller scale. And then obviously like bigger budgets, bigger everything unlocks once you go with an organization. But even just doing the thing as is very conducive to getting like work in esports and showing that you can do these things. So it is important. Again, the education helps 100%. But I do think that one of the coolest thing about esports is that as long as you have like the passion and you have the actual like the will to put in the work to learn about all these things, you can do a lot of things in esports without having like massive support or anything.
Right. So it very much is like just a matter of like using the resources that you have, whether it's education or otherwise, just to build that like foundation that you can just move forward with.
100%. And I think that even like people in esports like understand that like people are not going to be like, oh no, it is not the greatest production value, how dare you. Like, people understand that in certain cases you don't have access to those things, but it's more important that you did. So just doing it, OP, just do it.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point to make. Before we do move on with our other questions, just wanted to give a heads up to anybody watching. I do see a couple of questions already in chat. Go ahead and hold on to those for right now. We will be sure to come back to them towards the end of the stream. So if anybody does have any more questions to ask our lovely guests today, feel free to just drop them in the chat, and we'll be sure to come back to them once we're done with the questions we have set here. So with that said, let's go ahead and move on to our next question, which is, what is something you wish you would have known about gaming and esports before you entered the field? So Kevin, once again, we can start with you if you're ready.
Yeah, I can kind of tackle this. So something that I guess I wish I would have known, right, like before coming into the space, was just, trying to build your network more, right? And so this is just, it's kind of hard for me to like equate this to like before I knew about gaming and esports, right, and then getting into the industry. But when I was in school, right, like the big thing, especially in the esports industry, right, is a lot of it's about connections, right? The industry itself, right, is relatively small in terms of how many companies are in the space, how many players there are, right? Like, but in some way, shape, or form, everyone is somehow connected. And so big thing for me, right, is I am in a startup. And so I have a little bit more of the entrepreneurship side. But it was really just about like establishing connections, right? Like making sure that you are networking, getting to know people, really understanding like who are the contacts, who are the people that if I need this support piece with, right, like I can contact this person, solely because there's not as many resources out there, right? There's no like tutorial on like, right. And I saw a question about this, right? Like there's no tutorial on like how to build an esports org or like how to do this correctly or, how to build X, Y, and Z in the gaming space. And so just knowing the right people to be able to contact is probably the most important thing. And so that's kind of the one thing that, I wish I knew about, right? In that regards, but yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would say that, and this is something I took to great advantage of while I was at DePaul. To Kevin's point exactly, is just making sure that you know how to network properly and how to like identify the people that, for one thing, are going to talk to you and to drive the most value for you. Because if you just reach out to someone and say, hey, I want to work in esports, can we talk? The likelihood of someone reaching back to you is very low, because get in line. You're not the first person that wants to work in esports, and you're not going to be the last either. So you got to find key ways to identify with the person and come with specific asks. So if you, I'll just use me as an example here. If you wanted to reach out to me specifically because you wanted to learn about what's it like to work in partnerships in esports, or what would be a good thing to know when working with a brand that's entering the space for the first time, you need to come up with pointed questions that are relevant to the person in their field, as opposed to just blanket reaching out to 50,000 people, which this is what I did exactly, which, didn't go super great for me. I would say it's just, if you reach out to everybody and you just use some sort of blank template format where you're just saying, hi, I want to work in esports, please talk to me, I feel like you're not really going to get anywhere. So from a networking perspective, which I wish I'd done a better job of when I first started, would be to emphasize quality connections and quality reach out as opposed to quantity. There are a lot of people trying to get into the space, and you see it on LinkedIn too, where there are people that have like 5,000 mutual esports connections with you, but the reality is none of them actually work in the space. They all just mutually talk to each other about esports and don't actually get anything done. So make sure that you're smart with how you network too.
Right. Very much like an aspect of like, making sure that your time and energy is like spent correctly as opposed
Absolutely.
to just going wherever.
Yeah, I think that the importance of networking is 100%. Like we all said it, but it is the single like biggest item, I would think. That if you don't know it before you get into esports, you will find out about it soon, because it's really just knowing a lot of people, being good to people, knowing the right people, obviously, opens up so many doors, or partnerships, or like even just like knowing a person that knows a person that knows a person. That kind of stuff happens, and just having just the option, having the opportunity to have access to these people or like these ideas or whatever it might be, even when they're not very obvious. Like obviously you're thinking maybe like the ones in like in your specific part of esports, but just having like vast, diverse, knowing like a lot of different types of people in all types only opens more doors. So it is very, very good to have these type of diverse connections in esports in general, and even outside of esports sometimes, because again, we're becoming more and more interconnected with companies like Hauk was mentioning. NRG is like partnered with McDonald's, like that kind of stuff. It's not anymore just like like SteelSeries and all the endemic like companies in esports. It's becoming much bigger very, very quickly. So have a diverse network, very important.
I actually want to piggyback off of something you just said that I think is super important to also kind of know about, like what to do right when you're getting into the space is learning how to convey esports, which is very intricate and very detailed in nature. Being able to convey that to people that don't understand esports is going to be a huge win. You mentioned right like NRG and McDonald's, right? And I wouldn't speak on anybody at McDonald's or NRG, but I've worked with a lot of companies that you're speaking to someone who wants to get into the space, right? They want to partner in esports. They want to be a sponsor in esports, but they have zero idea about it. And so being able to effectively communicate with them is very hard if you can't take what is a very technical kind of industry with a bunch of different keywords and phrases, and being able to convey that a little bit better, right? And to make it a little bit more streamlined is if you can figure that out, right? Like you'll be very well off when it comes down to conveying it to parents, right? To administrators or people within companies that might be looking into the space. So I want to just kind of pop that in there.
Yeah, I think that's a great anecdote to just throw in there for sure. So next question would be, how do you think the industry has adapted or changed as a result of the ongoing pandemic that's been happening?
I could speak from GG League's end. And so like we work with, obviously we work with colleges, but we also work with like park districts and cities to bring, esports programming to their communities. One thing that has kind of adapted and changed is pre-pandemic, right? Cities and park districts weren't necessarily looking at esports and online gaming as being a type of programming in a recreational setting. That has since changed, which is, a positive in that sense. I think a couple other things that like maybe more stigmas is like everyone's like, oh, like, esports, that's remote, it's virtual. But the one thing that I think everything that has gone on has shown us is that it's not, right? And like all the, the big infrastructure, right? Like the CDL, right? And then Overwatch League, they couldn't sustain as well when we moved to a more remote and virtual setting. So it kind of allowed for, the esports industry as a whole to really figure out like, how do we manage, the remote and virtual world, as well as being in person and really hone in on a lot of those kind of logistics. So those are kind of the things that I saw on my end. But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say for us, I think a big adaptation that we had to do, this was prior to me joining the company, but a big thing that we had to do was how to properly create content without being all together. So it's a lot more challenging to create content on a consistent basis, which is a main driver for impressions, not only for our partners, but also to keep ourselves top of mind across our fans and to make sure that we're still engaging with our fans and communities across all of our games on a consistent basis, comes down to content. So our production team are all superstars when it comes to handling remote content shoots where we, film a bunch of content all at once, and then it seeds out across all of our different communities, be it Rocket League, Apex, Overwatch, whatever it might be. But just being able to adapt to properly making content in an environment like that is very challenging. But I think the orgs that have done a good job of figuring that out during the pandemic are going to be the ones that capitalize the most moving out of it. Being able to handle and do remote shoots on top of being able, those same skill sets and lessons that you've learned from that time can easily transfer when things open up again back more.
Yeah, without a doubt. I think that obviously esports had the luck compared to most other industries, really, to be, you can run esports tournament online just fine, right? So esports objectively thrived during the pandemic compared to just about anything else. Obviously, it's not the same thing. You can argue, obviously, I'm a big fan of in-person events and in-person just like engagement in general. So obviously it's worse. It's not as good as it can be, but until it is safe to do so, that's just kind of the world we live in. But I think esports did really well actually in adapting. Our space, collegiate, some schools were in person, some schools weren't in person, right? So it kind of depends on how administration sees it and what kind of restrictions they put in place. But in general, I think as an industry, we did really well, and we are currently doing really well at adapting to all these new challenges. Because at the end of the day, though, obviously, going off the content example that Hauk was mentioning, it is much harder to like shoot content and create engagement when you can't do these things in person. There's also the angle of like people want more content, because obviously if you're at home more, there's more like content to consume essentially. So there's like, it's hard to call them silver linings because again, the pandemic is just horrible in general, but there's a give and take to it, I think. And I think that esports was one of the few industries that really seized like the moment, understood it pretty early on how that has to change. And I thought it would change pretty well.
Yeah, I can agree that like it's really allowed like a lot of organizations in the industry to kind of like step back and be like, okay, this is like a chance to like really try and figure things out. Whether it's like what you were talking about with like adapting for the sake of like content creation, like trying to figure out new ways to do it, or new ways to go about doing things in a way that is also honing your skills for when things begin to transition back to like having more in-person shoots or just more in-person like sessions. So it's been really great, I think, in that end, just to be able to, have that opportunity to try something new, try to work on something that you wouldn't have had the opportunity to before. So it's definitely a good way to like you're saying, maybe not necessarily like a silver lining, but a way to just be able to make light of the situation. So absolutely. So looking at now that we've been able to like kind of look over the past like couple of years, let's look a little bit towards the future. So what major developments do you see in the gaming and esports industry specifically over the next 5 years?
Yeah, so there's a couple of different facets to it. I think that one of the bigger things that we'll probably see is more of a consolidation effort between companies. And what I kind of mean by that, right, is you look at all these different, whether it's tournament organizers, whether it's, professional organizers, pro teams, all those pieces. I think there's going to be a heavier consolidation in terms of larger companies coming in, purchasing all of the smaller companies and helping kind of build more of a full-fledged arsenal to be able to have, more sustainable, kind of like company moving forward. Other big things, though, is kind of the recreational space. And this is just solely because I am so, heavily entrenched in it. Is just seeing a little bit more traction in kind of that like recreational, pathway to college, especially from, 8 years old on, right? And so how did they go from some sort of club fashion into, high schools, then to getting scouted by colleges? I think that pathway is something that is going to be, ever changing, but is probably something that's going to be a little bit more looked at, especially since colleges are now, definitely getting more on board with esports. And now they're looking at how do we recruit? How do we bring in new players? How do we bring in more fans? Right. And so I see Lorenzo getting all excited over there, right? And so those are the big things that I know that are key issues, right? And when I say issues, just like things that most colleges are looking for, right? Like, how do we recruit? How do we find the best talent? How do we do all these things? And so I think that we'll probably see a lot of those types of developments over the next couple of years.
Yeah, at least on our end, we're definitely excited about the collegiate space and looking forward to seeing how it develops from more of like where I think the industry overall is going over the next 5 years. I think we're going to continue to see the convergence of gaming and esports with just other facets of media and entertainment. So we're already seeing lots more of like FaZe Clan put on a concert last week with Jack Harlow, stuff like that, for example, or Ariana Grande digitizing herself and doing a Fortnite concert, things like that. So I think we're going to start to get to the point. I don't think we're there yet, but the example I give is that frequently, if you ever see a bunch of celebrities hanging out with each other, they've got their celebrity entourage, and it's like a basketball player plus a rapper plus a comedian might be in the mix too. So you've got, like a big ball player plus a rapper. And then, Kevin Hart is probably in the mix too, just because he's everywhere. And I think in the next 5 years or so, we're going to start to see these top gamers and streamers start to be part of those same entourages. And maybe they'll even start to create content together in their own sort of houses or something like that. So, you could see a house together where it's like Jack Harlow plus I can't name any basketball players, plus Kevin Hart, plus like Nick Merckx or something like that, for example, where it's all people operating as sort of this convergence at all of these different kinds of entertainment together. Because most people watch basketball, most people listen to music, most people watch movies or listen to comedy, whatever it might be. Most people game too. So just seeing more convergence between all of these different forms of entertainment, I think we're going to see a lot more of that within the next 5 years.
Yeah, that's a really interesting take. I haven't heard that one very much. But it's definitely like, plausible. I mean, everybody brings up stuff like how, League of Legends finals got more viewership than the Super Bowl and like stuff like that. And it's like, esports is a very serious like entertainment like form of entertainment media at this point. So I think that's a really good point that like, the figureheads are going to start to come together from different circles. I think it's
right.
I think it's a really good point to make there.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you, Hauk, because that was a sick take. I had not heard a bunch of this stuff before, and it's good. I'll be thinking about that quite a bit. But I think in general, and I was talking about it with you guys a little bit before the show went live. I think mobile is on the rise, and I say this, and I'm adamant about this because I was not a believer at first. I thought, no way, dude. Like, no, like there's no way there's gonna be a lot of stuff on phones, right? But then you look into it, and it's already kind of there in certain markets. So like China, Southeast Asia in general, really, Japan and Korea are hopping on quite hard. They've got leagues. They've got the Crossfire. I think it's Crossfire mobile. Like they've got a full league in China, right? Already, right? Same way that we could look at LCS here in NA. Worlds for games like Mobile Legends or whatever, they get a lot of viewership. They get a lot of they have a big player base from all of these countries. So I think it's only a matter of time before that comes to the West as well. And it's already kind of happening with like Riot hopping onto Wild Rift and really pushing that pretty hard early on with some Western organizations signing players for it already. So I think that is one of the big things. Obviously, from my perspective as collegiate, it's growing bigger. There is just no doubt about it. State schools are getting into it. Yeah, DePaul, forever DePaul. But like state schools are getting into it. Big schools are coming. Like, and this happens fast, right? Like ISU wasn't really like that easy example for me because they're here in town. But ISU wasn't a big player until like 2 years ago. They weren't a big player in collegiate, right? You would think of Maryville, Harrisburg, all these like great schools doing amazing work, obviously. But took them 2 years, and now they've got top teams in multiple games. They got an amazing facility that they're about to finish building, and they're hosting like big events. So like that kind of stuff happens faster than you think, and it'll catch people by surprise when all of a sudden, like, I don't know, Big Ten schools are in like with varsity program and stuff like that. So I think collegiate will be growing bigger, and the events will become higher quality, and there's going to be more and more work in collegiate, and there's going to be more and more involvement in collegiate. And like pro teams have scouted collegiate players. That has happened in League of Legends and Overwatch. It has happened. So I think it's just going to get bigger and better as time goes on, and I'm excited for it. I'm here for it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm definitely
And the ball
very
will
happy
be the
to see it.
best. The ball, the best.
I appreciate it.
Don't tell my boss I said that.
I won't. Lips are sealed. Quite literally, lips are sealed. So don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm happy that I've been hearing a lot of hype for collegiate stuff. Obviously, I'm a little bit biased for obvious reasons, but like you're saying, it really is just about going on to like bigger and better things as time goes on, and it ends up being very fast as a result. So very exciting times for sure. So before we move on to our final question, we might as well go ahead and check out a couple of comments left by people watching. A couple of questions. So first one we've got here is right here. So this is a bit of a doozy. This is, I think I struggle a little with finding that kicking off point with the career shift. So how does somebody get involved who has no experience but wants to get involved? So I know this is something we touched upon a little bit earlier on, but if there's any other additional specific points you all want to give, feel free to chime in.
It's certainly challenging, especially if you're someone that already has, if you've already started your career. So like if you're someone that's a few years out of school and you've already been working in some capacity in the professional world, and aren't like someone that's just like looking for an entry-level esports position or something like that, I wouldn't lose hope though, because the esports industry, more than any time I would say so far, really needs to ramp up and professionalize in a way that we have not in the past. So like we are working with a lot more, I don't want to use the word legitimate brands, but I will say we're working now more with brands that are much more professional and have different expectations, because they're looking at any org, energy being one of them, as a big part of a larger media buy spend, and how they approach that is very, very different than if you're just being sponsored by like G Fuel or something like that. G Fuel doesn't really care what you do, but if you're like we're not affiliated with them, but let's just use Nike as an example here. Nike is just very different than G Fuel in terms of what those expectations might be. So if you are someone with professional experience, I would say now is your best time really to get into the space, because you actually have, worked with actual adults and, have a better idea of how to interact and engage with these kinds of people. But to go back to the point of like, how do you get in once you have the professional experience? It's just really about networking. Leverage Twitter a lot. A lot of stuff happens on Twitter. So try to find people on Twitter that are in the space that you're trying to be in specifically. Start interacting with them, not in a weird way, but just like start to ask them questions and engage with them, that kind of thing. Same thing goes for LinkedIn. Start reaching out. Just ask about, hey, if you want to work in partnerships. Hey, I have done partnerships over at X, Y, and Z company. I'd love to learn more about what's different about it, at an esports org, for example. Or if you are someone that knows how to create stuff, be it social media assets or videos or anything like that, just start building stuff for free. Just start making some things for people to take a look at so that people know what you can do. Make sure you've got that portfolio ready and current at all times.
Yeah, I want to piggyback kind of just off of what Hauk was saying there. I mean, there is a huge shift into especially the more professional side, right? And in terms of how this industry is evolving, how this industry is growing. I think a really cool thing though is that the esports industry as a whole doesn't stick to like the norms of like traditional large corporations and large industries, right? And so networking is a little bit different, right? Like how to apply for places is a little bit different. Hauk mentioned create content and utilize that content to try and get yourself a position. I think 100 Thieves does a pretty good job at trying to push people to do like social media campaigns as a way to apply for their internship programs, right? And so you'll see new ways of getting your foot in the door, and I think that's the really cool piece, is not just like send your resume in, hope and pray and fingers crossed that you might get an interview. This one's a little bit more of how do you make it more personalized. I switched careers, right? And so I was a chef. I went to get my finance degree, and now I'm in, esports industry, right? And working in a whole different field. But a lot of the things that I've learned also equate into this industry as well. And so I would just say, like, for me, right, the number one thing I would say is networking. Hauk kind of touched on it. I'm just going to reiterate that, right? Like going onto LinkedIn, finding people that you're, semi-connected to and trying to use that as a jumping off point. Most likely, if you connect with somebody and then make a positive impact, they'll connect you to somebody else that might get you a little bit closer to where you want to be. And then you just keep following that rabbit hole, right? And then eventually you might land and an opportunity might come up. I wasn't planning and I wasn't like, this is where I'm going to be. But as I just kept going, right, like the opportunities kept kind of opening up. And so that's just my big piece. Continue to kind of network and build your kind of connection base.
Right. I'm also really glad that you brought up the whole point that like there's a lot of like newer ways to kind of get involved. Like you were mentioning with like 100 Thieves, like they just kind of have like a social media, like I don't know if a contest is the right way to put it, but it's more like, it's an opportunity. Like they recently had one, I think, for if you wanted to join like their like content creation team, like you had to create like a TikTok, I believe, and then you just like send it over to them and they just judge it that way. So there's a lot of like, points like that where you can just kind of like prove yourself and kind of put yourself out there in a way that's meaningful and as direct as possible. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, I think in general, just like any other passion industry, really, like whether that's film, music, or whatever it might be, there's going to be some working for free involved just to prove that you can do a thing well. And then people that can pay you and like make you go full time and all that can judge you off of that, right? So it really comes down to doing whatever you're interested in. You can do it for like smaller orgs that are just looking for anybody to make graphic assets or whatever, right? Or like if you're interested in casting or something, casting small tournaments, just doing the thing at any scale that you can. And then again, from there, you can start like building a network and start getting to know people, which is super, super important. Like in any other industry, it's super important to build your network. But besides that, just doing the thing and constantly really like putting your best in every single thing that you are doing, because what that like people will see every one of your previous efforts, and what that actually, sorry, English hard. What that translates to is having like your best pieces. Like you really, the point I'm trying to make is that you just want to put your best effort into every single thing that you do, because people will look at that and making sure that those are good pieces, good performances, or whatever it may be, is how you get to work doing those things.
Yeah, absolutely. All really good points right there. We had another follow-up question from Joby Job Lopez. I apologize if I butchered their name a little bit. This one's another bit of a tricky question, but I know that Hauk, you had mentioned briefly about trying to have like a startup going in esports, which is a very daunting task indeed. But if somebody wants to get an esports org in Chicago going, what does that necessarily involve, even if just like on the surface level?
Like if we wanted to get an esports org in Chicago, like starting an org.
Yeah.
I mean, we got Optic. Like that's literally my company is Optic. But other than that, I mean, I think, and I was trying to start doing this actually before I started working at Energy and got too busy, was just trying to start really at the grassroots level, just trying to start to activate and do stuff more in Chicago. I think part of what, when I was still in college and trying to differentiate myself to just like stand out, just because everybody's in Los Angeles or is trying to move out there, that's where our castle is and stuff like that. I really try to differentiate myself specifically by being the guy in Chicago. So I intentionally reached out to everyone I knew in Chicago, or I could find that was based in Chicago that worked in the space. And that started being a few different things. I tried to get a podcast off the ground that nobody cared about, myself included. But it's just like finding ways to start things and build things that are here in Chicago. I know I tried with the help of GG Leagues, started a collegiate league that was, for all the different schools in Chicago. We competed in a few different games, and that wouldn't have happened without GG Leagues, as well as Optimus Tom. So shout out to him too for his help with helping get that off the ground and make that happen. So there are ways to do it. It's just really, you got to take more of a like build approach as opposed to like waiting for something to happen. You've really just got to make it happen yourself. If you have interest in trying to help make another Chicago Collegiate Esports League, reach out to me. I would definitely like to help, but I cannot be the driving force behind it. So if you're interested, let me know and we can talk about that.
Very nice, very nice. I think that's I think you brought up a lot of honestly really good advice there. That was a very detailed response. So thank you.
Yeah, I wanna just segue other people that are in Chicago and like doing tournaments that you could reach out to. Will English, Chicago local, Will English the fourth on Twitter, amazing producer, broadcaster, caster, does everything. He's insane. Kaiju Corp, Kaiju Corp, like corporation. Look them up on Twitter. They host tournaments. They have a community. They're great. And Chicago Overwatch as well. They're gonna do stuff that isn't just Overwatch. Kind of close to Kaiju Corp as well. So all these people, if you just ask him like, I want to do some work, there will be work, and they're doing amazing work already. But very community oriented, great people all around.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of people. There's definitely quite a few people like in the Chicago scene and just the overall like industry like that are just they're willing to do stuff just out of like pure passion. Like if you're willing to work with them, they're going to be willing to work with you. So you just got to keep your eyes out for them. So I think we have a couple more questions here. First one is this is something we touched up on a little bit earlier, but how big of a role does entrepreneurship play in esports?
I'm happy to jump off of this one really quick, just because this is the pathway that I took into Paul. So I think entrepreneurship is huge, right? The entrepreneurship mindset is probably a very, very good mindset to have if you want to get into the esports industry, solely because there's no playbook to how to do anything that's going on in esports right now, right? I think there's no playbook on how to build a franchise model for professional esports organizations, right? There's no playbook on all of these things. And so it's really up to the industry to help kind of build that and help trial and error a bunch of different things to figure out what works. And so for me, right, like entrepreneurship, I think is huge when it comes into esports as a whole. If you want to start your own company, right, like that's a whole separate journey. But I also think that getting into the space as well with that kind of mindset allows you to look at larger problems, right? And so like esports has all the the kinks and kind of the flaws, and then there's larger, bigger picture items, and having that kind of mindset, right, like allows you to look at it from a higher view to see what are those potential kind of like avenues that you could take to fix them. And so I'm a big advocate for having that type of mindset. But I think that it helps in a lot of regards in kind of the esports industry as a whole. And so don't know if that answers your question, but if you ever do have questions about just like entrepreneurship and like if you wanted to start something, right, you can always feel free to reach out to me. I'm always happy to chat about things and starting businesses in esports as well. Perfect.
So definitely a very, very worthwhile offer for anybody watching. So feel free to take note.
Yeah.
Hauk, is there anything else?
Yeah, well, just like, I mean, literally every esports org right now and every company that's based in esports right now are startups. And so you really need to take an entrepreneurial approach, even if you're not, the entrepreneur starting the company. You need to be well aware, to Kevin's point, exactly that any company that you work at is going to have, bumps in the road, kinks that you got to work out, stuff like that, especially as you start to scale, which is at the point where we're at right now, where we're really starting to ramp up all the sponsors we have and all the content that we're pushing out. So how do you create processes that scale so that, okay, maybe we're doing fine right now with how we're handling everything, but a year from now, if we're in, and I'm just making things up here, but if let's say we're in 20 more games next year and we have 50 billion more sponsors, it's going to take a lot of a different approach to systematically go about handling all of our different processes. So even if you're not the one building the startup yourself, you have to be able to be amenable to a more startup environment, and that takes a much more entrepreneurial attitude, and you have to be willing to get your hands dirty in things that may not be a part of your job, for example. So like, on my end, maybe I have to write copy for a social media post or something that's with one of our partners, but that's not technically my job, but whatever, you just kind of have to do it at certain days of the week or whatever is going on. So entrepreneurship is key in esports. Absolutely.
100%. Entrepreneurship is number one thing. Like Hauk was saying, if you work in esports, you will do everything. It is just how it is. And just having the drive to just go and do it, no matter at first how well or how bad it goes, just making something happen and like creating things, it is the number one thing. So just go out, do it, and iterate, fail, succeed, whatever it might be. Just do it, and then good things come to those who do it.
Yeah, the key philosophy behind being an entrepreneur, you know. So, Kevin, I think this one is a bit more for you. I know you talked a little bit about GG Leagues at the start of the stream, but just so that everybody's on the same page here, knows what's going on, do you mind giving a quick
Absolutely.
Pitch, if you will?
Great question from a great person. So a little bit more about GG Leagues. We are a full service solution, right? And so we are a tournament organization platform. We are a software, and so we're a tech company first, but we provide our technology to park districts and cities across the country, right? Libraries, other organizations to help them launch and run their esports solutions. You could think of us as kind of a full service solution to like a Smash.gg or a Battlefy. We provide all the tournament admins, referees, kind of that full, enhancement, right? And so that's got a little bit about who we are. We also do run leagues in collegiate. We don't necessarily, partner with colleges across the country, but we do run leagues. And so that's another aspect of what we do. But yeah, in its form, right, we are a esports management platform, and we are just contracted, right, to help run and officiate all the esports leagues that we run, with kids as young as 8 years old. And so we have leagues that are available for, the youth division, which is like ages 8 to 12, and then the teen division, which is 13 to 18. And then we also have our 18 plus kind of like open adult league as well. So.
Yeah, very nice. Very all-encompassing group. Definitely keep yourselves busy over there. So finally, probably the most important question of this entire panel. How possible is it to go pro in Bejeweled 2? Any thoughts?
I suggest taking your skills to Candy Crush. Next big thing. The skill set's transferred. I think it's a no-brainer. Try to go pro in Candy Crush.
Well said. Well said. Well, anyways, yeah, I mean, all things aside, I think that's pretty much all the questions we got from myself and from the chat. So we're pretty much ready to close out. I think we got a lot of really good points from everybody here, a lot of really good pieces of advice. But, before we finish up here, is there any other questions you all wanted to, or any other, rather, comments that you all wanted to give? Maybe some final pieces of advice, different ways to plug, ways to contact you? Anything?
For me, best way to contact me would be to go through LinkedIn. And so you can always, and hopefully Matt, you can, yeah, there we go. Feel free to reach out to me. I am always available. Yeah, that's best thing for me, right? If you really want to get into the space, you want to learn a little bit more about the industry, feel free to reach out to me. I also, and I saw this kind of going in the chats, Andy Clark is doing a great and the first esports class at DePaul, right? And so if you are a student at DePaul, I would definitely recommend looking at that class. It's like the business of esports. I know that Hauk and I will probably be speaking at that class at some point as well. And so it's a great way to just get involved and, be a little bit more involved in space. So that's my plug. Want to thank everybody though for listening in and listening to what we have to say.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, taking the time out of your day to have me featured here at DePaul. Go Blue Demons, I guess. If you want to reach out, please feel free on LinkedIn, though I highly encourage you to say something in your connection request. If you say nothing in your connection request, I will not add you and I will not talk to you. And that's a lesson you should learn now. So please feel free to reach out. You should definitely mention this is the way you found me, because then I will definitely talk to you.
Glad that you made that distinction right there.
Yeah, so for me, if anybody wants to talk about esports, anything of the sort, collegiate, can contact me on the Twitter. And if you don't have a Twitter, make a Twitter, because everything in esports happens on Twitter. So DM me, my DMs are open. I will talk to anybody, anything, help anybody with anything. I just want more people to get into esports. I want to help everybody. I'll try my best at least. And besides that, check out IO Esports Twitter and all of the things that we do. IO Esports, the second best school in collegiate esports after DePaul. The first one if my boss is within earshot. We do some pretty good work, if I do say so myself. We try our best. We're going to do even more this year. Now the people are back on campus. I'm very excited.
Absolutely. Well, that's really great. I'm glad that you are all able to, share all your different perspectives and opinions on the esports industry. It was really great to have you all on, and I really appreciate it. To everybody who is watching, we did once again take another week off from our usual initially weekly schedule for career chats. We are going to be working on getting some new episodes coming up as soon as we possibly can. So be sure to keep on the lookout for those. You could just check them out you can check us out on all of our socials. We're on Twitter, we're on Discord, we're on Instagram, we're on Facebook. We're quite honestly all over the place. So as long as you keep your eyes out, you'll be able to find out when the next time we're going to be hosting one of these is. So make sure to keep your eyes out. So on that note, once again, Hauk, Kevin, Lorenzo, thank you all so much for coming by today. Really appreciate having you all on. And hopefully we'll be able to see you all next time.
Thank you for hosting. Thank you for having us.
Thanks, everybody.